Hey everyone, welcome back to Holistic Health Masterclass podcast and video here. I am with Frank Clegg, former CEO of Microsoft Canada. Frank, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so it's taken us a little bit to coordinate our schedules and get you here, and we've had some good conversations offline. So I think let's just jump right into it. Obviously we know that you're the former Microsoft CEO, but how did you sort of find your way into Canadians for Safe Technology and some of the campaigns that we're going to talk about today?
Well, it started several years ago when there was a gas-fired power plant that was going to be put in our community, and it was the second largest in Canada in the most dense population area. So we were able to get that plant moved, and then I developed a reputation in the local community. And then I was approached by three different families. One that had Bell Canada was putting a set of small antennas on a building about 10 meters from their son's bedroom. Another one, they were putting a tower, I think it was Bell or Rogers, on a fire station that was 50 meters away from the kids' playground. And the third one was, these clock malls that are in most shopping centers. And they were putting in like 16 antennas in that clock tower structure, again, about 70 or 80 meters from. So the more we looked at it, the more we investigated it, we had the opportunity to watch Health Canada and Industry Canada present to our local council. And by the time we finished with that, I said, look, we have to do something about this. So we founded C4SD about 8 years ago now.
Okay, so 8 years ago, and I guess, for people who are not familiar with your organization, I know some people watching this and listening, I've already shared what we're talking about, so some people are on board, they know about it. But what's your sort of mission with Canadians for Safe Technology? What's the sort of intention there?
Well, there's really two things we focus on, Brett. The first is to raise awareness that there is potential harmful effects from wireless devices and from cell towers and Wi-Fi, and to help people use the technology more safely. We are Canadians for safe technology, not no technology, because we realize that people are going to use the technology. So how do we create an environment as safe as possible? The second mandate that we have is to lobby or advocate, I guess the better word, to all levels of government, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, to have the safety guidelines changed and improved and brought into the 21st century.
Okay. Well, and I like to hear that it's for safe technology and not no technology, because I think a lot of people, when they start looking at these types of movements and initiatives, they all of a sudden think that we're trying to get people to go back 500 years ago and run around in loincloths and whatnot, and that's really not it at all. Because I think technology is here to stay. I mean, we know it's here to stay. In fact, we're actually moving into more of a sort of tech-based economy and reality. So I think it's great what you're doing, and let's sort of get into a little bit of those two initiatives. I think what I would like to do is spend a bit of time today and actually point most of our focus onto 5G, because I know that 5G is really the hot button topic right now. So for people who are not aware of what 5G is, maybe they've just heard it, can you explain to us what 5G is and maybe what the difference is between 4G and 5G?
Sure. 5G just stands for the fifth generation. So it's basically a marketing term to help identify the difference between 5G and 4G. So 5G, we will not get into electronic spectrum. I will not turn this into a business
class. Thank you.
But there's a set of radio frequencies, and if you think back to, there's a radio waves and the TV antenna waves that are these long waves that people are used to, and they're saying, look, they've been there forever, and they help us get constant radio. At the other end of that spectrum, you have things like X-rays, and those are a lot shorter, higher frequencies and a lot shorter wavelengths, and we know that those harm us. So we're talking about the wavelengths in between, and there's a set of them. Think of these as like different bands of information frequencies. And so what 5G does is it extends the bandwidth of 4G. So there's 3G, then 4G, and then 5G. So there's extra frequencies that are added. Plus there's something called millimeter waves, which we've never used for telecommunications protocol before.
Okay.
And so the concern, I don't know if you want me to get into it, but the concern on the 5G millimeter waves is, as I said, they've never been used. And these are the kind of waves that are used for a crowd control system. So the US and the Israeli military use this frequency to help, because it gets in the skin and it really causes pain on your skin, right?
Okay,
Now,
interesting.
now scientists that are hired by industry say, well, we use different power. Well, that may be true, but there are no studies to show that this high millimeter wave frequency, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you're going to be exposed to cannot have harm. And so what we're saying is, look, there's a potential harm there. We know it hurts us. We know it physically hurts us at a certain power level. What makes you say that just because the power level is less, that it's not going to hurt you?
Right, and I think when you start getting into some of the health effects, you know, we're talking about chronic health effects. You know, we'll sort of circle back to that. These are not things that, you know, one time I used my phone and all of a sudden I've got brain cancer tomorrow morning. This is really chronic, persistent use, which is what we're doing. And of course, we're surrounded by this technology, as you said, 24 hours a day. So just so that I understand, and for our listeners and viewers, the difference between 4G and 5G, my understanding anyway, is that it's a significant jump up, if you will, from, you know, let's say 3G to 4G or even 2G to 4G. And so is it the millimeter waves that is really the big differentiator here?
Well, there's that, Brent, and then there's also two other major factors. Because of the limitations of this new set of frequencies. So the good news you hear is you can download a video in a lot less time.
Right.
Right. And so because think of that being a pipe that's a lot bigger. So the 5G pipe is this big, the 4G pipe might be that big, right? The problem with 5G is, though, because it has the ability to carry so much data, it has to be a lot closer to the source of the information. So there are currently about 750,000 antennas in Canada today.
In Canada. Okay, wow.
Canada. Yes. Projections are that will double for 5G alone. And so you now have a lot more antennas. So you have double the amount of antennas. And these are now, we're talking about these small cell antennas that are about the size of a shoebox, right? And now they would have to be placed closer. And so what we're seeing them installed now is on any street light post, any telephone post, or any hydro pole is a candidate to have one of these 5G antennas. And because of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, is that because, you know, I've heard this before as well, is everything needs to be put closer together, right? Because it doesn't travel as far of a distance.
Exactly.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay.
It's absolutely on a limitation on the 5G frequency, and those frequencies that are in 5G, let me say it that way, that they don't have the ability to travel the distance that a 4G or a 3G. So you get more information going through that pipe, but the pipe has to be a lot closer because of the limitations of the actual frequencies that are in 5G.
Okay, so following that, then, you know, let's talk about safety studies, right? You know, have we actually done any safety studies here? And I know that other countries, again, off the top of my head, I know Russia has been looking into this stuff for a really long time. So perhaps talk to us a little bit about what we've done in Canada, and then sort of, you know, pit that against what's been done elsewhere in the world. Because of course we know places like Switzerland, for example, have really halted the rollout of 5G amid, you know, safety concerns. So I don't know where you want to start with that, but you know, yeah.
Well, let me just make a global statement that there are no studies that exist that show that 5G technology is safe.
Okay.
Period. Nothing. What we're starting to see very early indications of studies that are saying, very preliminary studies, and maybe less than a couple dozen studies that are trying to study 5G. But part of the challenge is that 5G technology isn't really finished and it isn't finalized. So it's pretty hard to set up a study when the technology is still moving. We do know that 5G will take on and will have all the same health effect concerns that 4G and 3G. So concerns, and there are now links to cancer. There are links, definitive, peer-reviewed, published studies. And I'm not talking one or two, I'm talking hundreds of studies that show harm to humans and the environment from 3G and 4G technology. So sperm damage and other reproductive damage, damage to our DNA, to our cells in our body. So we know that 5G will have all the same effects. And Brent, as you said, it's really hard because you're talking about a chronic situation, right? So now, you know, we do have, and that's one of the concerns about Safety Code 6, which is Health Canada's guidelines, is there is no analysis over sustained, continuous exposure to this technology.
Hmm. Have they done animal studies at all, like on rats or mice or anything like that?
The last study that I saw that Health Canada reference had 6 rats in it.
Okay. And of course, we know from, I know from work in the world of GMOs and chemicals and whatnot, that oftentimes long-term, quote unquote, studies are not all that long-term. They sort of cut the study short after 3 months, but if you left it going for 6 or 9 months, all of a sudden the real truth starts coming out.
Well, the best study that we have is actually 2. There's one that was done by the National Toxicology Program in the US. So this is a study funded by the National Institute of Health, over 30 million US dollars, and it involved over 2,000 rodents. And what they did is they put these rodents in a Faraday cage so that they knew only the radiation, that they were the source of the radiation. And they studied those rats over more than months. I think it was a year and a half in both studies. And the way the National Toxicology Program rates things is the highest rating can be clear evidence of harm. And that's where they came out. So that the study results were peer reviewed 3 different times. And the last time was verified by over a dozen scientists over 2 or 3 days that came out with the support for the statement that clear evidence of harm, cancer in the rats, and DNA damage in the rats. That was then followed up by Ramazzini Institute out of Italy that did a similar study, similar environment, and verified the study results from the National Toxicology Program. So you now have got 2 studies involving thousands of rodents that show clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage to rats. And the reason we use rats is because it's ethically not appropriate to do that study on humans. It's just no scientist would ever do that. So what you do is you look at you do rodent studies, and then you do the epidemiological studies, which study cancer and research. And we have the research out of Dr. Hardell and his group out of Sweden have done the studies because they have the best data in Sweden, and they're showing a link. So you now have the DNA damage and the cancer in rats, and you now have the epidemiological work.
So I mean, coming back to these, well, first of all, is government actually aware of this, or, without getting conspiratorial or anything like that, do we feel like there's more of a vested interest in upgrading our technology than there is looking after the health of people?
Well, we've met with Health Canada, not to the minister. We've not had any success in having a meeting with the minister, but we've met with the Director General, which is the top bureaucrat that owns the radiation file. And I've met with 4 different director generals over this 8 years that C4C's been around. And they're stuck, my opinion, they're stuck in this mindset that if it's an ionizing radiation, which is at the part of the spectrum we're talking about, if it's a non-ionizing radiation, you have to heat tissue to harm it. And that initial theory goes back to the 1920s in the scientific literature.
Okay, so 100 years ago, basically.
Yes, 1920s, that we are stuck. Health Canada is stuck in that mindset. And so they just, for some reason, they just will not be open to any other health effects unless they heat tissue. So you got a chicken and egg thing saying, if it doesn't heat the tissue, then I won't accept the science. And we're saying, but the science is showing you have to get rid of your assumption that you have to heat tissue to harm it. So that's one issue. The other issue, quite frankly, is the current estimates are there's about $20 billion in revenue to the federal government in these spectrum auctions. So I don't know how much of a factor that is, but I could argue there's 20 billion reasons not to slow down the deployment of 5G. And there's supposed to be another auction coming up. The last auction was $3.5 billion just for that one set of spectrum at the auction. And now there's another auction supposed to be coming out this summer. Based on COVID, I don't know if the government's going to get to it. But the point is, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in revenue. So, and then the third issue I have with this whole process is you've got the same scientists involved in this thing for the last decade. And I can't believe that it's a bit of their reputational concern, and quite frankly, a bit of ego involved that may be causing them to stay stuck in this mindset. So, Brett, along with answer your question, for the life of me, I can't figure out why Health Canada is not doing a better job. So to answer your question, we have presented the NTP studies. We know they're aware of them. They've come back and answered that they said not enough information, and they're staying in the rut that they're in on the technology.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think we've seen this as someone who's been in this space for almost 20 years now, and I've looked at all different types of issues. I think it all boils down to the same kind of themes and the same type of thinking when it comes to things that may potentially cause harm. And, quite frankly, I think a lot of it is corporate interest, corporate interest that is sort of hijacked both science and oftentimes hijacks government policy. And this is why we have things that are now through independent science showing to cause harm, and yet we just somehow cannot get them off the market or cannot figure out a different way, which we're going to come back to in just a second. So where, you mentioned earlier, what was it, 75,000 towers or something like that?
750.
750. Okay, holy smokes. So there's not a lot of people in Canada. We're at 38 million. So that's a lot of towers, first of all. But where are we at in the rollout of all of this? Because I think a lot of people are still thinking that, we drive down the highway all of a sudden, which, by the way, we've been in lockdown here for, I don't know, almost 3 months. And I live out in the country, and I didn't go downtown for about 2 months. And I was quite shocked when the first time I actually did it, because all of a sudden there's these towers everywhere, things that I'd never seen before. And so I think that some people think that 5G is here right now. And when you see a tower, oh my gosh, it's happening right now. Where are we at in the rollout process?
You'd have to ask the industry specifically, but my understanding is that the majority of the small cell antennas, which are the requirement for 5G, are really being deployed as 4G antennas now. Okay. And so I believe that it's in the industry's interest, because there's a lot more awareness about 5G and the potential concerns about 5G than there ever was about 4G or 3G.
Yeah, agreed.
And so if I was running the industry deployment strategy, I would get out there as quickly as I could and put as many 4G antennas out there, because I don't need anybody's permission or any notification to convert that from a 4G to a 5G. So I don't. So even though we're hearing Rogers tell us and Bell talk about these 5G pilots, I actually don't know whether that pilot is an actually 5G technology or using 4G to test for the 5G. But we certainly know, and everything you read, there's this big race against China and Russia and all that. And we're now starting to see there's a Dr. Shockley out of the University of Colorado who's written a very extensive paper that's challenging the whole business case around wireless technology. The IEEE is saying that wireless technology uses 10 times more energy than a wired solution.
Interesting.
So part of our appeal, and I think I know we're going to talk about this, is that as they ask the federal government to start investigating fiber technology and fiber solutions where they can. Some applications do, but the majority of applications do not need a wireless connection. They can be done through a wired connection. And what Dr. Schlocky's argument is that once you make the investment in that wired connection, you don't have to keep upgrading it. But in the wireless world, you have to take a 2G antenna, replace it with 3G, replace it with 4G, and then potentially replace it with 5G. So there's a whole discussion around the whole business case on 5G technology. But to your point, or to your question, I don't know. I'm not aware of any one application that is a pure 5G device.
Okay.
Or 5G antenna. I have not seen one. I've been trying to track them, and I'm not aware of any device coming out and saying this only works and works best on a 5G infrastructure.
So I guess just for clarity's sake, I mean, are we able to actually pick up 5G right now? Like if on my cell phone, and I think another question to sort of pull that together as well is, we see the 2.4 gigahertz and then the 5G on the router.
Yes.
To my understanding, that's not the same thing as what we're talking. That's not the 5G tower that we're talking about. That's different.
No. As I said, the 5G is the marketing term. 5 gigahertz on your Wi-Fi is a specific category in that spectrum. So okay. There's 2.5 or 2.4 and 5 are in that spectrum. When you're talking about 5G, there's actually nothing to do with 5G. I think it's more in the 600. It goes up to 600 gigahertz.
Okay, so that's not in our home right now, but obviously once they sort of turn the lights on, if you will, with the rollout, then we're all going to be exposed to. Yeah,
in fact, the way that industry, science, and economic development guidelines are right now, the telcos do not, if they want to replace that, or let's say there's a street lamp right at the end of your driveway like we have here, there is Bell or Telus or Rogers, whoever owns that or cuts the deal with the town, can put one of these small cell antennas right on that street lamp post, and not only not have to tell us about it, they don't need any permission. So they can go and do that at any time. They're putting in the 4G and then they'll upgrade it to 5G. So there's no notification for these small cell antennas to be placed. And we've seen instances where there's close to 20 meters to a kid's bedroom without any notification or any permission needed.
Yeah, and I've started seeing that downtown mostly is apartment buildings and stuff like that. All of a sudden, there's these antennas like right above someone's bedroom, on the top floor, and that honestly terrifies me because once you switch that on, I think you were saying, I read somewhere on your website, we think that this might be fully rolled out by 2021.
Well, the industry, it depends on what you mean by fully rolled out.
Yeah.
Right, because does that mean you've got these extra 700,000 antennas out there, or does it mean you've got them in key areas? So but the point is, though, to your point, is the industry is still aggressively installing these small cell antennas as fast as they possibly can, while they don't need to notify or get any permissions. Because if anything, if we're successful, we will change. So you do have to get notification, you do have to get permission, and local towns and cities and municipalities will have a say in dropping these antennas just wherever the industry feels that they need them.
So, and obviously, I mean, I'll just say it because people are probably thinking it or they have a question. As far as I know, there have been 0 public hearings or any sort of referendums or anything about this, right?
We were successful in 2015 getting this on the agenda of the Federal Parliamentary Health Committee. And they hosted 3 sessions, and they invited speakers from around the world, so experts from around the world. And they had a mix of speakers representing industry and representing the concerns that C4ST and others do. And the committee came out with a report, a formal report, that had 15 recommendations to the Minister of Health. Now, this is back in 2015, so the election was called, and by law, the minister has 120 days to respond to a parliamentary committee report. And you may know this, but maybe your listeners don't. So anyways, so because the election is called, that report gets put on the shelf. We were successful then once the new government came in, the Trudeau government came in, working with the committee of the health committee, the committee of the committee chair. And one of our local Oakville, I live in Oakville, our local member of parliament was on the health committee. So they retabled the report. And so we now have got a report supported by 2 different governments, 2 different majority governments. And in both cases, it was 100% unanimous support by all parties. Table that, the minister's answer came back in 120 days and dismissed every single recommendation.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's not good.
No, well, that was to say it was disappointing is an understatement. But again, this goes back to this mindset. We're reviewing the science. We know what we're doing. There's no health effects. You're not heating the tissue. And we even asked a couple of the recommendations were about raising awareness. If you hold your cell phone to your head, you are breaking Safety Code 6 guidelines.
Okay.
We can debate whether Safety Code 6 is protective enough, and so CBC did a report, CBC Marketplace, and they went out and they interviewed people, and 80% of Canadians admitted that they held a cell phone to their head, and 60% of them said, I've never heard of radiation against my body, whether it's my head, stuck in my bra, my suit jacket pocket, or in my pants pocket. And so 3 of the recommendations from this health committee report in 2015 and 16 was to ask Health Canada and Industry Canada to raise awareness, and they refused to even do that.
Oh, wow. So not even awareness, let alone institute new policies or guidelines or anything like that.
Wouldn't even do that.
So, so what do you feel then that government really needs to do here? Like let's talk some solutions, and then we'll talk about what your appeal is, and kind of wrap us up there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Brent, the appeal really lays out what we're asking the government to do. So the first thing the government has to do, and health. Let me get specific by industry or ministry. Ministry of Health has to do a proper review of the scientific evidence. And what that means, and there's a set of criteria, there are papers written on how to properly review scientific evidence. Health Canada, when we met with one of the director generals, they don't even have the software that you need to evaluate the science properly. They don't even have the software. So you need to go in, and there's a set of rigorous steps of what you have to do. You make decisions on the search, and then you go and then you publish them, and then you review them, and then you bring in an independent panel. Health Canada has never done anything like that in any of their guidance. So that's step number one. Do the proper review based on the health and the science. The second request, and this goes to the Industry Canada and Finance Ministry, we hear the latest estimate I have is there's $17 trillion in benefits related to 5G, right? So big numbers. And every second month there's a bigger number. There has been no analysis of the costs from wireless technology. I mentioned that wired technology uses a tenth of the power. We do know that there's health effects. We do know there's lost productivity from health effects. We're starting to see security and privacy issues. Not only will 5G be closer to us, but the trillions and trillions of terabytes of information that will be going through the wireless network now gives hackers an unbelievable opportunity to get at personal, business, private, any kind of information, because it's all out there on this wireless network.
Okay, that's not good. Yeah.
So what are the costs for that? A local story, we had our fellow on our board who runs he has a retail outlet for factory tops, is a company. And so he got hacked, held for ransom, and he had to find $20,000 in Bitcoin before they would release his customer files back to him.
Wow.
This is just one example of a small business who has 5 retail outlets. Well, now take all of the more and more data and put it out there, right? So nobody's done any of that analysis. We're starting to hear concerns about satellites that we're going to need for 5G starting to impact weather data. So now what's the impact if the weather systems can't give us advance notice of some of these Katrina-like warnings? And this is not coming from me. This is coming from NASA and very reputable organizations saying, we are concerned about the effects. We don't know what the effects are, but we're concerned. So nobody's done that economic analysis. Get the 17 trillion big number, but nobody's balancing that against all the other potential costs. So that's the second thing we're asking for. Third major ask is to say to the government, use fiber, evaluate using fiber more aggressively internally in government systems, because we do know that long-term fiber is cheaper than a wireless continuing to have to upgrade, right? So you can take the lead, government of Canada, internally, and start using fiber and educating and making people aware. Maybe there's some incentives you need to provide industry to do that. And then the fourth and final ask is, while all these things are being done, stop deploying 5G. Just put a halt on 5G technology.
Yeah.
And the licensing fee. So first of all, stop filling your coffers up with licensing fees. And secondly, stop. Now people say, wait a minute, there's a race to China. I maintain that if the government got their act together and did that, they could do those things within a year. And then in a year the industry can be ready and start deploying again. But while right now we have our guidelines are, as I said before, 1920 science are based on our guidelines, so a century old. Let's get those up into the 21st century, and let's understand the full economic consequences.
Do you feel that this is actually reasonable and doable, given the climate that we're in, because I feel that so much of what we're witnessing now, people doing more remote work, we're talking about things like contact tracing and more, increased surveillance. Part of me thinks that this stuff is just steamrolling forward, and we have to have the 5G technology in place to be able to do all of these things. So I guess my question, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, I mean, from the cost side of things, but also from the reality side of things, do you think it's possible?
I think it's not only possible, quite frankly, Brad, I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Wired systems will always be 100 times faster than wireless systems.
Okay.
That's just the way the technology works. So why is there, when we talk about a smart home, tell me why, I've never had Wi-Fi in my house. I've been in the industry for 45 years now. I've never had Wi-Fi in my house. And my wife and I had 2 daughters, so they went through the teenage years, and we grabbed a cable and we plugged it into the wall and we plugged it into their laptop, and they were just as socially connected as anybody. Why, what do you need a smart fridge for? It's not going to fly around the room. Why isn't there a wired device going to that smart fridge or that smart TV? Or, we're in this mindset that smart means wireless.
Hmm.
We should be in the mindset that smart means connected to the internet, and why can't it be connected to a cable? So and you know, quite frankly, from the industry standpoint, it's very clear. They're regulated. Bell is regulated on their wired telephone network.
Okay.
So their profit margins there are capped. It's an unlimited opportunity for wireless. So you've got an industry that's only motivation is continue to drive the wireless solutions. So they're not looking at all at a wired alternative because it doesn't cost, they don't get any money for it. Once you get a
Oh,
cable
okay.
into my house and I pay for that cable, you can't upgrade me.
Right, because it's there forever. Huh. So that so
There
it's almost
forever,
like
and my data's there, right? So you can't, I'm good. So your opportunity to get more revenue from me as a cable provider or the whoever that is, whether it's Bell, Rogers, Kojic, or whatever, is zero. Well, that is absolutely a bad thing for any business executive. So yes, is it possible? Yes. Do we need a mindset shift? 100%. But the consumer though has to be the one driving this as well. You know, so any one of your listeners saying every time, and nobody wants to hear this, so I'll say it. Every time you download a video on a wireless device or download it or watch it live stream, you are accelerating the opportunity for a 5G antenna to be on your street lamp post by your house.
okay.
So
Wow.
if you really want to stop this thing as a consumer, download it on a hardwired capability and then watch it offline,
Yeah.
right?
So, wow, I mean, lots to think about. And I know that a lot of our listeners and viewers will be 100% on board with all of this. So I guess the final sort of thing here, I don't really have any more questions, unless you have any other things that we haven't brought up, Frank, that you want to.
I want to plug our appeal. So I don't know.
100%. Yeah,
Okay,
100%.
so
Please.
our website is c4st.org, C Canadians, #4st.org/5G appeal. I'd really encourage people to go there. We put together this 8-minute video that you can watch that really summarizes the reasons for the appeal and some of the science behind it, very little bit of the science. What I'm proud about, Brett, this is the first time that we've done this as a group of organizations. We have 24 organizations and groups across Canada, from coast to coast,
Amazing.
that have signed up and are sponsoring and supporting this appeal. Now, there was a lot of fun creating a document that everybody could agree to. I will not tell you we went to over 70 versions of it, but we did. The point is that we've got that. We've got over 11,000 signatures now on the appeal, but I think we need a lot more to get the government's attention. So I'd ask people to, so first of all, go get educated. Mm-hmm. Tell your friends, families, and coworkers. Second thing is, let me talk about safety tips, if that's okay for a minute. What should people do?
Yeah.
Second, there's two things you need to do for yourself and your family. The first thing is, remember, distance is your friend. So what we've learned about this radiation is that the amount of radiation goes down with the square of the distance. So in other words, if I double the length or the distance from my head with my cell phone, the radiation goes down 4 times. If I triple that distance, the radiation goes down 9 times. So distance is your friend. So every device you're using, stay as far away from it as you can. The second, and I think almost more important thing, as you mentioned it, when we get out in the world, we're bombarded with radiation. Make your home or your house or wherever you live your safe haven. So when you come into that environment, when your kids come home from school or you come from work or whatever you're doing, you absolutely limit the amount of radiation. I mentioned that not everybody can rewire their house and get rid of the router. But what you can do is go to Canadian Tire or Rona or whatever and buy a timer you put on your lights and put that on your router so that at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever time you go to bed, it goes off. So you're not being bombarded needlessly while you're sleeping.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I've had people, I've had one story, and I'll stop quickly, but I've had people send me emails, Frank, that's the best thing for my work-life balance. I said, why? She said, because the timer goes off at 11, I lose my internet, and I have to make the decision, am I going to keep working or am I going to stop? And if I have it in the basement, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, you know what? I need to stop, right? So there's a bit of a work like the side benefit. So keep your cell phone away from don't have any electronic devices in your bedroom when you're sleeping. Period. Full stop. There's health reasons for that. There's psychological reasons. There's sleep deprivation reasons. Buy an alarm clock and use that to wake you up. Yeah. Right? And this thing we hear teens are, they have it under their pillow so they can feel the vibration and all that. So safe haven for your home or wherever you live, and distance is your friend.
Yeah.
And help us advocate to the government. Please sign the appeal. There's a box there that says send a message to your MP. We know we're having an effect. We know we're hearing from MPs now. We're getting letters back to people that are sending them with us. And then share the link with 2 friends, 2 family, and 2 coworkers.
Amazing. Well, just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I know it's so important, especially now. You know, this is really the time to make these changes happen before it's too late. You know, we don't want to get into the space where it gets rolled out and then we're trying to then remove it, because that is always more challenging.
Well, that won't happen, Brent. To be honest,
Yeah.
what we'll see is anything the government does, they typically grandfather whatever is done. So if the industry is successful in getting the technology out on these telephone poles and hydro poles, I don't think it'll be removed. I think it's there to stay.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, Frank, and for the work that you're doing. And for those of you watching and listening, I've put a bunch of links down in the show notes, whether it's YouTube, whether you're tuning in on the podcast. So click some of those links and go and check out Frank's website and Canadians for Safe Technology. Get involved, share this with your friends, your family, your community. And yeah, let's make this change happen. All right. So thanks for your time, Frank. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
All right. And for those of you tuning in, you have yourself a beautiful day wherever you are. And yeah, please spread the word. Thanks for dialing in.